Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're taking a look at the third expansion or the third main game from the Tanto Cuore series, and that is Romantic Vacation. This is the most recent set, and this was actually an Indiegogo project. I think the other ones might have been Indiegogo projects as well, or maybe Kickstarter projects, I don't really remember. But this is just another standalone set. You can buy this one, play it all by itself, or you can mix and match it with the other two Tanto Cuore base sets, Tanto Cuore and Tanto Cuore Expanding the House. How many times can I say Tanto Cuore during this review? Let's find out. But in any case, what this game adds, aside from having more general maids to choose from and more private maids, is a new mechanic called the Reminisce Cards, which is basically another a deck of cards that's going to go out, and you're always going to have 3 to choose from. And on your turn, you have the ability to try and purchase one of those Reminisce cards, but not using the normal methods. You have to meet a certain threshold of maids, love cards in your hands. The conditions change from card to card. So it's a pretty interesting mechanic, but is it enough to make this game stand apart from the other Tanto Cuore sets, and should you get this one before you get either of the other 2 sets? Well, let's do a brief overview, then we'll come back, and I'll let you know what I think. Alright, just a brief overview of all the new stuff that comes in Romantic Vacation. So, first and foremost, you're going to have the same kind of love cards as before with different art, which I'm sure is going to raise the ire of all the Tanto Cuore haters, but c'est la vie. Now, you have a new maid chief in the form of Sophia Marfil, who is basically the same as the other maid chiefs, but she's going to have different artwork. She's 8 to employ, and is worth 5 victory points. Beatrice here, also the same as some of the other maid chiefs. For each Beatrice you have is worth 2 victory points. You can chambermaid her for 2. If she's in your private quarters, she'll be worth victory points. So here's some of the more general maids that you can purchase. You have employ, For 7, you can get Frida Viento, who doesn't have any special ability, but lets you get 2 love, 2 draw, and 2 employs. Laura here, who is going to be every Tanto Cuore hater's favorite, is 6 to employ, gives you 2 draw, and you can chambermaid any number of chambermaids or chambermaid chiefs from your hand for free, which is actually really, really good. Clorinde C is one of what I like to call the push your luck cards in this set, in that she's 6 to employ and she gives you +1 draw. And by the way, I do have to apologize, but the text on these cards is so small that I'd have to literally hold them all the way up to the camera and change my focus just to see them. So you're going to have to take my word about what they do. But 6 to employ, +1 draw, +2 servings, and she's worth 2 victory points. So she's like an awesome card altogether. However, if you have 7 or more maid chiefs and or chambermaid chiefs, Clorinde C is worth 0 victory points instead of 2. So there's a weird type of math you have to do about keeping track of how many of her that you have and how many of the chiefs that you have. So it's kind of cool, actually. Lydia Leon is 5 to employ and gives you a serving, and you can reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, choose one, and put the chosen card in the hand and the rest in your discard pile. I kind of like her a lot. Florence Spring is you can chambermaid her, and if you have 7 or more chambermaids or chambermaid chiefs in your private quarters, Florence gains an additional 5 victory points. On her own, she has 0. Cynthia Lakes, each other player draws a card, but she gives you +4 draw for that, so is that worth it to you? You got to make that decision. Caldina Alley gives you 2 draw, and each other player with 5 or more cards in their hand chooses 1 card from their hand and puts it on the bottom of their deck. That could really screw someone up. Now, Rhea, you can return this card to the town after you have her, and if you do, your serving phase and employ phase end, but you increase the number of cards you draw at the end of your turn by 5. So basically, you use her to save up for a really awesome turn next time. Natsu Kuriyama, I love these names, has no special effects that she gives you, but you can return 2 maid cards from your hand to the town, and if you do, you can take 1 maid card from the town with a cost of 7 or less and add it to your hand, which is pretty huge. Thea Primrose gives you 2 more servings and another employ. Romina Vatrin's just going to give you some stuff over here, and your serving phase ends immediately because getting to draw 2 draws and 2 love can be pretty important. Daphne Corral lets you put a 1/2 love card from your hand from the town on top of your deck, which is fairly significant. Margarita's Ferrante. This is another one of the what I like to call push your luck cards. Now she gives you a draw, a love, and a serving, which is really, really good, and she only costs 3. However, if you've employed 3 or more Margarita, they are each worth a negative victory point as opposed to 0. So try to make sure you don't forget, and you only get 2 of her, and you'll be just fine. Germain Molly is going to let you take a chambermaid chief with an employee cost of 3 or less from the town into your discard pile, and if you do so, you also get to draw a card. She's pretty good. Avita Katala, put the top card of any player's deck into the discard pile, and if the discarded card was a love card, you gain an extra serving. That's good. Valencia Pretri, something like that. You can chambermaid her. She's normally worth a victory point. And during your starting phase, you may put your chambermaid Valencia into your discard pile, and if you do, you get to draw 2 cards. Hyacinth Arrow, you can chambermaid her for 1 serving, and if you have 2 or more Reminisce cards in your private quarters, she's worth an additional 2 victory points. We're going to get to that in a moment, what Reminisce cards are. And probably the most awkwardly clothed maid in the deck, if you really look at her, Nanetsuyo. You can put a card from your hand on top of your deck in addition to the other stuff she has. Let's not dwell on her too long. So now let's talk about the Reminisce cards, which are the centerpiece of this expansion. Now you may have noticed there's no private maids. The Reminisce cards sort of take the place of the private maids for this standalone set, but you could mix the private maids from the other sets into this deck. How this is basically going to work is that at the beginning of the game, you're going to lay out the Reminiscence cards, and there's going to always be 3 available to purchase. Now, the thing is, there's 2 categories of Reminisce cards, and I really hate this, but there's a super tiny number. Let me see if I can focus on that at all, but there's a super tiny number underneath the artwork for these cards that, let me see here. Yeah, see that right there? There's a little 1 there. I really wish they need to work on the typography of all of these cards and all of these different sets, but basically there'll be 1 cards and 2 cards. You're going to separate those at the beginning, shuffle each pile, and then put the 1s on tops of the 2s, so you're going to be drawing the 1 cards first, and they're always going to have 3 available to purchase, and there's, except for some of the later cards, there's multiples of each one, and how you're going to actually do this is each card is going to have a cost associated with it. Now, you don't have to actually spend one of your employees for the turn to get one of the Reminisce cards, but you can still only get one of these once per turn. And how you actually do the cost is by discarding cards. So you see that river canoeing here, I'm sure you don't actually see that, but for 5, if you discard 5 love cards of any denomination from your hand, you're going to be able to gain this Reminisce cards. Let me see if I can focus that a little bit more. And then when you have this Reminisce card, as soon as you gain it, you can put 1 made card from the town into your discard pile, and it's worth 3 victory points. You're basically just going to keep this off to the side in like your private quarters. Picnic is worth 3 victory points, but you're going to have to get rid of made cards with a total employee cost of 10 or more. So you're going to be looking at the employee cost up in the top corner of the normal made cards. But you get the 3 victory points, and you can put 3 2-love cards from the town into your discard pile. Astronomic observation. Who doesn't do that when they're on vacation? Made cards with you have to discard made cards with a total employee cost of 15 or more, but you gain 3 victory points, and you immediately gain 8 love and another buy, which is really, really good. The Hidden Hot Springs is going to give you 3 victory points, but you must discard 2 cards with an employee cost of 4 and 1 card with an employee cost of 3 exactly. But you put 2 3-love cards from the town into your hand, so that's like giving you 6 extra buying power right away. Scary Night is a pretty simple one. You can discard 1 card with an employee cost of 3 and 1 card with an employee cost of 2, and every other player discards down to 3 cards in their hand, so that's pretty devastating, actually. Archipelago Tour is going to give you 6 victory points, and now we're into the 2 cards, by the way, but is going to give you 6 victory points, and you can take an extra turn after this turn. That's ridiculous. But I should note that you have to get rid of 4 Mage Chief cards from your hand. Fireworks is also worth 6 victory points, but you have to discard a card with an employee cost of 7, 1 with a cost of 5, and 1 with a cost of 4, and then the number of cards you draw at the end of the discard phase is increased by 5, so you're stacking up for a huge turn. Underwater Cave Discovery is a whopping 10 victory points and no other special ability because 10 victory points is humongous. You get 4 General Maid. You have to discard 4 General Maid cards, each with an employee cost of 5 or more. Let's get to that one last. Trek into the Ancient Ruins is worth 6 victory points. Again, there's no other special ability here. It's just worth 6, but you only have to discard 2 General Maid cards, each with an employee cost of 5 or more. And finally, the Campfire card is worth 6 victory points. You have to discard Maid cards with a total employee cost of 24 or more, but the game immediately ends when you do that. Now, the reason why you might want that to happen is if you know you're ahead, but the game's not going to end the normal way by having Maid cards run out quickly. Then you might just want to go ahead and end the game prematurely. And one thing to remember, like I said, this card is not just going to be automatically at a certain point in the deck. This is going to be shuffled up with the other 2 cards underneath the 1 cards. So you never know when this card is going to come out and be available for purchase. So it puts a sort of semi-time limit on the game. But anyways, that's basically all the new stuff that's in Romantic Vacation. You can play it by itself. You can play it with the other Tanto Cuore decks. Let's go back and I'll tell you what I think about all this. Well, I was really, really impressed with Romantic Vacation, upwards and above expanding the house for sure, and I possibly even like it more than the base set of Tanto Cuore. Now, what really sells it is, it's actually a couple of different things. First off, the general maids that you have access to are much more interesting in this set. There's a lot of little push your luck elements. There's 2 in particular that I'm thinking of. One of the maids says that if you take too many of her, employ too many of her into your deck, then you're actually going to take -2 victory points for every one of them. But she's a really good card, so you need to make sure that you maybe you want to take more of her if you don't care about the kind of hit. I doubt it, but you want to make sure to grab at least a couple of her because she's so good. But you have to remember as the game drags on not to employ another one of her because that's going to be really, really bad for you. Now there's another one that says that card is worth victory points at the end of the game, but if you take too many of her, then they're all going to be worth 0. So it's a push your luck aspect of I really want the victory points that card is worth, but I have to keep track of how many are in my deck because if I get too many, I'm totally boned, so to speak. So that's really interesting. And there's a lot of cards in the game that are kind of like that. A lot of cards about taking more love cards for free, but you risk diluting your deck. Things like that. Some really interesting elements that I think the game really needed to have more, to keep more excitement in the game, to keep it more lively, and to keep your mind engaged, not just like going through the motions of buying cards and moving on to the next person's turn like multiplayer solitaire. Now, the Reminiscence cards, though, are really, really well done in this. I mentioned in my Expanding the House review that I didn't think that the centerpiece of that game, the building cards, were all that interesting because they were just essentially more victory point cards that you had to do some sort of weird prerequisites to get. Now, the Reminiscence cards, you also have to have weird prerequisites to get, like having a certain amount of maids of different employee costs in your hand or love card costs with different costs in your hand. But the effects that you get for them are much, much better and can be even game-changing. Now, and in fact, there are maids in town that will then rebound off of those. There's one maid in particular that's going to give you more victory points if you have enough of the Reminiscence cards. So I really like that a lot. So there's more interaction between the general maid stacks and the Reminiscence cards stacks. And the effects, like I said, they could be game-changing. They could be giving you more love to spend, letting you draw more cards, hurting the other players, and so on and so forth. Now, the one complaint that I have is that there's not enough variety of them. There's several copies of each of the normal cards until you get down to the bottom stack of the Reminiscence card deck, which has a card that will actually end the game, which I actually kind of like. I mean, sometimes the game can drag on a bit too long. Any kind of deck builder like this, where you're waiting for stacks to run out, especially in the games that I've played with Romantic Vacation, it seemed like there were so many decent good cards to pick from that people weren't saving up or buying a lot of love cards just to get one particular card. We were willing to take a shot and get something else, at least in the games that we played. So it was getting longer and longer for the maid stacks to run out. But you know that the game was going to end because everyone was going for those Reminiscence cards, and we were going to draw that card eventually that was just going to end the game. But I really like that. As long as it had more variety, it would be fine. Do I need to go on about the theme again? If you don't like the theme, you don't like the theme. And this game has more maids that are even more scantily clad because they have swimsuits on. So that is just not going to work for some people, and I totally get it. I'm not one of those people that gets upset about that because I can understand where people do not like the theme. I come from an anime background. I don't really mind it. I think it's funny more than anything. I've always been fascinated that the Japanese culture, anime or not, loves maids so much. So I think it's quirky. I think the cards are well designed. Even if the text is still incredibly small, I don't really understand why they can't do something about that. But nevertheless, I really like this game. I really like the other two sets as well, and I think this is probably my favorite set so far. And I think that if you've already got the other two, this is a must-buy for you. It's really great having those Reminiscence cards. It's really great having more options for the general maids. If you're doing the randomizer thing and taking maids from every single deck, or mixing all the private maids together, which you should definitely do. Great set for a great game that I really like a lot. And I hope that eventually people that have a huge problem with this game's theme are at least willing to play it if they like deck builders like Dominion and others. I think that once they actually play it, they'll find that it's actually quite enjoyable. At least I hope so. So, my name is Nick. This is Board Game Brawl, reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every day. Every day and in every day? Every day and in every way. Goodbye.